said, for instance, like, that you are never going to be loved, and not worthy of that love, I want you to write the opposite, because the opposite is 100% true. And I want you to write down that you are loved, and you have been loved from before the moment of your creation. And I want you to go find biblical scripture to back that up. If you sit there and you feel envious of others, and that is what you're struggling with in the lie, I want you to write on the side of truth that your life was created with a purpose, and that there is goodness awaiting you. And that the success of others does not take away from that in you. That you can champion and cheer for other people, and you are called to do that. And I want you to write down that truth and challenge the lies. And why this is important in terms of combating loneliness is that sometimes these narratives run rampant, and we allow them to run rampant. We cannot control so many things that occur in our lives. I mean, we're witnessing that right now with a global pandemic. We cannot control that there is currently a virus sweeping across the world. We can't. However, we can control how we react to it. We can control how we, take action. And that action begins in our mindset. That action begins in what we think, because our thoughts become our actions. So that's like the first thing I want to say to you is, work on you and start with internalizing. And then that's an example of like an activity that I've done personally that's really been helpful. Expanding beyond that, once you start to work on yourself, and I'll say too, I always put that one first, because I don't want you to just step into a community and expect it to fix you. I don't want you to walk into a room full of people and say, I'm not going to do the work on me. I'm not going to check in with my heart, because I just expect this community to take away those feelings. I expect, like it works with striving the same way, doesn't it? It's like when you're climbing that ladder of striving, you expect the next accomplishment to eradicate your feeling of unworthiness, or to eliminate that feeling that you don't measure up, and it doesn't. Unfortunately, sometimes it can even make it worse. It can even feel like, okay, well, I've got the thing I waited for. Why don't I feel fixed? Why don't I feel healed? And we all know, listening to this, that's because we can't be healed through accomplishments and achievements. That's not where our worth and our value stems from. But we often can fall into that trap. And so the same applies here to community. We're going to work on ourselves. We're going to take care of ourselves. We're going to heal ourselves. We're going to have those internal conversations that we need to have. We're going to write down the lies. We're going to, reaffirm the truths. We're going to embrace the fact that we are loved, and that we can use that love to love other people. We're going to step into that. And once we do that, now we begin to navigate the spaces that are external, that other people occupy. And this is where it gets down to, investing in community. And there's sort of two routes that I look at when I look at giving advice in this space. The first is to join communities that exist, or to get more plugged into the ones where you already occupy space. And so this is always a good challenge, because I know a lot of people that can list, hundreds of communities or Facebook groups that they're in, right? Like they're like, I'm super involved. I'm a part of this and that and the other. But I like to raise the challenge of saying, wonderful, but let's get you engaged. Because you can be in a Facebook group and not be a part of contributing to the conversation. You can show up at church and sit in the pews, but not actually be an engaged member of a congregation. You can, give a shout out on social media to a charity you care about, but have you lifted a hand to actually help? And so I think these are the spaces where we can get more involved in communities that exist and opportunities that are around us by simply taking action. And look, I know it's scary. I know it is terrifying to be vulnerable and to put yourself out there and to step up and to do more than just observe or to lurk. I know it is. Trust me, I do. But I also know that there is no fruit from just waiting for a seed to be planted and cultivated. You have to do the work of actually, digging into the soil with your hands and getting dirty and getting muddy and getting messy and planting that seed, and then waiting for it to grow. And I think that that's how we need to look at communities. We can't just expect it to happen. We have to go out and be engaged and show up. And that's the first kind of route that I would say to go. The second one is, there are a lot of people listening to this that maybe, haven't found the right community. Maybe they've been waiting to find a table where there's a seat for them, or they are in communities but don't really feel like they're the right fit in this season. For those of you who feel that way, there's a second route to go, and that is to build your own table. That is just start to create communities of your own. And that's the route that I went as a small business owner, when I looked left and right, and the communities that I saw were traditional networking groups where, you'd walk into the room and it was all about what you could get rather than what you could give. It was all about shaking hands and collecting business cards and collecting people as if they're, trophies for your own success in the entrepreneurial world, instead of doing life alongside people like we're supposed to, we're called and created to do. And so I tried my very best to build my own table. And that might be what some of you listening to this were supposed to hear from today's podcast. That might be the one message you were supposed to take away. And the truth of the matter is that if you are called to build your own table or create your own community, it starts one person at a time. And it isn't something that just happens overnight, in a viral manner, and it's just like always a spark to a fire. It sometimes starts slow, and it sometimes starts by just reaching out a hand and, asking someone, to connect. Right now, maybe it's a Zoom coffee date because we're not all, getting together in person, or it could look like connecting with a long lost friend that you haven't connected with in a while, but it involves speaking up and reaching out a hand, because something Rachel said that I think is so important and so many of us can relate to, is that when we go through lonely seasons and we finally do open up to someone and we say, oh, this has just been such a hard time, we're very often met with, but why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me? I would have been there. This is what I'm here for. I want to be there for you. But you see, I really believe that the enemy wants to keep us in the darkness. The enemy wants to keep us isolated. We cannot flourish when we are alone. And that's where the lies just ravage us. It's when we're not connected, because the minute we're connected to other people and we're reaching out to those friends and we're building community one person at a time, they can oftentimes speak truth to our lives. And in my own world, early on, I've been through a lot of different personal struggles, and I'm fairly open with them. I was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor in my early 20s, and I went through brain surgery in my late 20s. And one of the resulting implications of that was infertility. And without modern medicine, I am barren, by all definitions. And I hid that from the world for such a long time. I was so afraid to be open and honest about that. I really, and look, whether it's the Enneagram 3 in me that wants to look perfect from the outside in, or it's just human nature, it's just being a woman and being too afraid sometimes for us to be vulnerable about those longings on our hearts that just feel like oxygen in our lungs, like without it, we can't even breathe. Like, I don't know what it is, but I do know that I felt such freedom the first moment I shared what I was walking through with someone that I loved.
Yes.
When I was able to say, like, this is what I'm experiencing and I am struggling. I am feeling so broken and I'm feeling so inadequate and I am feeling just like this is so unfair and I can barely process it and I just need to get it out and I just need to be honest about what I'm walking through. And I was met with love. And I was met in that season, because I was vulnerable, by additional vulnerability. When one of us is willing to be open with another person, we empower vulnerability in our communities. We create safe spaces where people feel comfortable. And look, the opposite of that is true. When someone comes forward and is vulnerable and is willing to share a story with you that they are ashamed of, or that they are struggling with, or that they are walking through, I want to really challenge you to approach them with nothing but love, to set aside judgment, to set aside fear, especially in that first moment of vulnerability. I would say there is always time later for good counsel and guidance. Sometimes what people really need is just to know that they are loved. And our opportunity there is to be that love for them in that season. And for me, that was very much what I was met with. And, I can't even put into words the impact that had in my own walk and in my own season of, like, little by little stripping away the masks that we wear, and little by little feeling like I could stop trying to pretend like I had it all together, and I could stop trying to pretend like things were perfect, and I could just be real and be honest and be vulnerable. And then I was met by that same vulnerability. When I would share that I was walking through infertility, I had a girlfriend that I never knew had experienced an early pregnancy loss, and her opening up to me, we wept together. And I look back and we had even now we're very, very close. We had such different experiences, and none of us could truly know exactly what the other one had endured, but we loved one another. And in that moment, we were family for one another. And I think that there's such power in that. And so I want to encourage you, maybe it looks like getting involved in communities that exist, but I also think it looks like doing the one-to-one. I always say, like, community sometimes is one to many. You walk into a packed room and it's one and tons of other people. So it's the one to many. But I really believe the most profound impact in any kind of society is the one-to-one. It's, three people sitting together or 12 disciples sitting around a table. And that's where the magic really happens.
And I want to challenge the girl too that's listening, that when you said, like, reach out, the one-to-one, have that conversation. Maybe you're the one that initiates it and she just feels crippled in fear, maybe because she's experienced past hurt or rejection. I want to speak to you in your heart that Philippians 4:19 promises us that our God will meet all of our needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And if what you're needing is community and love and friendship and prayer, those are good, fruitful things. The Lord does not want to hold that back from you. So in that moment, I think of vulnerability, of just humbling yourself and saying, hey, I need help. Like, would you go grab coffee with me? Or can we go on a walk? Or something like that, I think is a beautiful opportunity for God to be able to show himself to you through that. And not saying that rejection might not happen, because unfortunately it's always a possibility. But I think choosing to move forward in that obediently, regardless of what the outcome might be, is always going to be met with blessing. And the Lord is always going to want to come through for you in those ways. And it might be with that person, or he might swoop in someone else. You just never know. But I would want to speak to that heart that maybe is fearful or hesitant of rejection that could come, that our Lord has promised us that. And that is a heavy and beautiful promise that he will always come through on. And I'm sure Natalie has many stories like I do about that, but he just will. And I can't explain it, but he does, and he will. So I just wanted to speak to the girl that probably was, as you were talking, like, oh, I can't do it. You can, and you're called to.
And look, I'll build upon that too. When you've experienced rejection, the enemy wants you to think that that's how it's always going to be.
Yes.
When you've been hurt in community, because community is imperfect, it's created by humans, it's imperfect. Rejection will happen. I think all of us have a different moment in our lives where we have or will experience that sensation, and the enemy wants you to sit in that, and there is that feeling of like, well, I could never reach out again, I can never try again, and that's not the place where we're meant to be. Brene Brown has a quote that I joke, I'm like, I'll tattoo this on my body. I probably won't, but I love it. And, she says, if you go walking through the world looking for reasons why you don't belong, you're going to find them. And the opposite is true as well. And it's this idea that if you have been rejected, and so when you walk into a space, you are looking for all the reasons why you won't fit in. You are looking for all the reasons why you won't belong. You are looking for all the reasons why you're going to feel that same way over again. You're going to find evidence for that. Every person's gaze will feel piercing and judgmental. Every person's remark will feel cutting and directed to you. But when you flip the script, and that's when I talk about internal work, like working on your heart, and you walk into that room knowing that you do belong, knowing that you are welcome, knowing that you have a space there, you see that through an entirely different lens. You see that through a lens that every person's gaze is an opportunity to connect. Every person's outstretched hand is a chance to make a new friend. Like, every opportunity in that space is calling for something greater and not to harm you. And I think that won't take away the need for discernment, but I do think it shifts the lens through which we walk into a room.
Yes, believing to our core we belong before we ever have any thought someone would reject us. I think that we would all carry ourselves so much differently. And I think being co-heirs of Christ, we are supposed to walk that way, and we have the permission to walk this way. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so beautiful about being a believer in this space and talking to our community is we carry the community, like you were saying earlier, in our spiritual DNA, regardless of what our human DNA says. So what does it look like for us to choose that over how we feel, to choose truth over feelings? And walking in that, I think we would have so many neat encounters, opportunities, relationships that start, and honestly, it just would manifest in so many amazing ways when we choose to do so. One of my favorite things to ask people to wrap this up is, what are you loving these days? What's something that you have to share with the people that they might not know about quite yet?
Ooh, well, you know what's okay, wait. You know what's really embarrassing is when you said that,
What?
I wanted to say hummus, and then I realized you weren't asking a question about like food. You were asking a life question. I really wanted to respond. I discovered.
You can say hummus. We've had people say vacuum cleaners.
God.
People have said ice cream flavors. Like literally anything that makes Natalie happy.
Okay, wait.
That you think.
And I have to do this. Okay, so I traveled to Israel. I've been to Israel twice in the last couple of years. Honeybook has an office out there, and I flew out, and all the Israelis like took me around Jerusalem. We did like it was the most extraordinary experience of my life. But that's
amazing.
Israel. Yeah, by the way, if anyone goes to Israel ever and you want to just connect with some of the most amazing humans, the honeybuggers that live in Tel Aviv are amazing. So just DM me and I'll give you my recs. Actually, on my blog, if you Google like Natalie Franke Israel travel guide, I have a whole list of things that we did. So highly recommend. But I discovered hummus out there and I fell in love with it while I was in Israel. And then I came home and like hadn't really had it. And then I discovered that they now make hummus in all sorts of different varieties, not just your typical like garlic and red pepper hummus. I'm talking sweet dessert hummuses. And before you cringe, they're so good because chickpeas themselves are like kind of unflavored. So you can go any direction with them. So that's what I'm loving right now. I'll leave it with that. I'll say delicious hummus. I'm really loving that. But I think what I'm also loving, I'll say something sappy because it's me. I'm also loving digital togetherness in a season of physical isolation. I am loving seeing how we are taking advantage of the technology that we have and using it for good, and choosing to use it for good and consciously taking action and connecting with one another on these platforms. And, you know, it won't ever replace physical connection. And we need that. We truly need that as human beings. But I am loving seeing people FaceTime with their grandparents and teaching them how to use the technology and connecting with old friends over Zoom and, you know, a glass of wine and doing small group virtually and like continuing all of these different facets of our lives as best we can through digital togetherness. And in a lot of ways, even using what's happening right now as a reason, not that we ever need one, but as a reason to reach out and check on people that we love. And I'm loving that. And I'll stand behind that.
Wow.
So hummus and digital togetherness. Those are my two.
I bet you there's like peanut butter. I'm thinking like chocolate. I think wow, a whole new thing. Would you eat it with pretzels? You know, if it was sweet?
I think so. I've had it with I like pita chips. I'm a big pita chip, but I know people that eat it with cookies, which is like maybe a little much, but like, you know, the tiny chocolate chip cookies, they'll like dip it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I'm picking it up. All right. Well, we are going to link everything that you just mentioned and more in our show notes for today. So if you're listening and you want that travel guide or anything else that we talked about in today's episode, then you know to head over to behindtheblesspodcast.com. Natalie, again, thank you so much. I'm like jotting down so many notes so quickly, can't keep up. So I can't wait to re-listen to this. And I think listeners are like, yep, gonna have to re-listen because there was so much goodness that you shared that really started turning my wheels and stirring my heart, and conversations like these are so good for me.
I'm really honored that you would ask, and I want to encourage anyone listening to this, like, please don't let the conversation end here. I would love to connect with you. I would love to, you know, support you in any way that I can on your journey. And for those who are either running a small business or starting one, Rising Tide Society is an awesome place to get connected, and that, you know, can be maybe a starting place for if you aren't already involved, like digging deeper into your local community. But even on the personal side, never hesitate to reach out, never hesitate to send me a DM, just at Natalie Franke on Instagram. I'm in a current season of not answering them, so please don't judge me. With COVID, it's been hard, and no childcare and balancing full-time job and writing a book and a lot of other things, but I do my best. And so I would just invite you to know that, like, I try to hold space for these conversations, and I try to hold space for you. And that's really what I feel called to do. Not so much to speak on stages, but to create them for other people and to hold them for other people too. And so I want to invite you to connect with me and continue the conversation. But Rachel, like, I'm just really honored that you'd asked to have me on today. Thank you.
This episode of Behind the Bliss podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more episodes so you don't miss episodes full of encouragement. And don't forget to rate and review so that we can continue to bring you the best content. see you in the next episode.